Hello, welcome to episode 10 on the series Introduction to Programming. Previously, we took a look at numeric formats. This episode, we're going to talk about a couple of the numeric operators. Specifically, we're going to talk about modulus, exponential, and increment and decrement. So one of the operators that we can talk about is the modulus operator. Modulus operators are helpful because they allow us to determine what is the remainder of an operation. So if I just simply do x divided by y, and I run this guy, you're going to see that it is 1.75. But if I wanted to know if I just could divide it evenly, or divide it by a whole number, and I want to know what the remainder is, the modulus operator would tell me that it's 3, because 7 divided by 4 is divided once, and then you have 3 left over. You can use this to determine whether or not a number is even or not. So for example, if I do a modulus of 2, I can determine that because it returns 1, it is not even. If I change x to 8 and I run this, you'll see that it spits out 0. It divides cleanly by 2. We know that it is an even number. There's one use for the modulus operator. We also have kind of an odd concept that you can do in JavaScript where you do the modulus with a negative value. This will still spit out a positive number for the modulus, because when it's computing the remainder, it doesn't actually care that the modulus is negative or positive. It just simply treats it as an absolute value. What does cause a bit of confusion is when I pass in the x side of the modulus operator a negative value, you end up with a negative output. And this can be slightly misleading, especially if you get input that you don't expect to be negative. All of a sudden, your simple checks are, oh, if this is equal to 1, well, all of a sudden it gets false, even though -7 is an odd number. One of the ways you can work around this is by simply taking your modulus and adding back the original value. Now, if it's negative, that's not going to work. We have to turn it into a positive value. In this case, we can test that is the modulus of -7 equal to 1 by adding in the modulus of 2. So we can determine -7 is odd or even, right? If I change this to be 0, it will return false because it's not. But if I use -6, it'll return. Still returns false. What? Why would you return false in this case? Oh, because, right. You have to do the modulus again because I just added a number and it takes it out of the range. There we go. And the reasoning why here is because if I run this without the second modulus, the value will become 2. Right? If I just run it like this, the output's 2 because I just told it to add 2. So you have to do the modulus again, and then you can do a simple comparison to see whether or not this is even or if it is odd. That is the modulus operator. The exponential operator is another type of operator that we can make use of. If you do multiplication, again, 3 times 2 is 6. If I change this to 2 stars here, that makes it an exponential operator. In this case, it outputs 9. Right? And the reason why is because it's doing 3 to the power of 2. If I change it to 4 to the power of 3, again, we're going to get an output of 64 because, again, 4 to the power of 3 is 64. So this is a very convenient way in JavaScript to do powers, especially if you're converting formulas. It's a lot cleaner to use the operator than it is to try and use some of the library for math, and it makes the equation look a little bit cleaner, right? If I want to do, this plus x to the z, for example, and I go here and I change this and I type in 5, for example, and we're going to get a decent sized number, right? So it's a lot cleaner to write it out this way if you're trying to convert some sort of formula or, computing the squares, for example. It makes the exponential operator a very clean and elegant way of displaying formula. So, increment and decrement operators are very commonly used when you want to increase or decrease a value by 1. So for example, if I just, run this here, I have x being spat out. I can do an operation called an increment operation. And I'm going to show here with 2 lines just so you can see what's actually happening here. So when I run this, you're basically going to see the number 4 get printed out, and then you're going to see the number 5. And what happens between these two is the plus plus here on the end. And this is the equivalent of writing out, you know, x equals x plus 1, but because I have it in the postfix position or after the variable, I want you to return the x value before you make the change. If I change it to a prefix, which means I put the plus plus beforehand, one of the things you'll notice is that it will say 5, 5, because what I'm saying is I want you to do x equals x plus 1, but I want you to give me the output x, not the input x. And so this is a useful way of having it do certain computations where I want to increment, but I don't want it to increment with the value I'm using right now. I want you to increment after I've made use of the value. We can do the same thing with minus minus operators. The way that these guys work is they perform a subtraction of 1 after the variable's been used. And again, if I put it in the prefix position or before the variable, it will apply it immediately. And then it'll, when I print out x again, it'll already have been subtracted. So there's no difference here. The increment and decrement operators are very common when you want to count, right? So for example, I want to, while x is greater than 0, I want to write out x, and I want to immediately run it down. You can see that it spits out 3, 2, 1, 0. If I move it into the postfix notation, it'll keep the first value, then do the subtraction. And when it does this check, it will be subtracted, but when I print it, it will still be 1 value higher because I haven't performed the subtraction when I'm writing. I perform it after I've used the value. So you can use this with combination of looping to do various forms of counting operations. Using prefix and postfix allows you to have some flexibility on what the value is when you use it. And so together you can do a lot of branching situations depending on what you're being passed in and what you want to do with it, right? You may want to say, oh, let's put space in here. So you may want to have the users numbered starting at 4 all the way down to 1, whereas other places you may have the user starting at 3 and iterate down all the way to 0, right? So it depends on what value you want to use when you're displaying the number to the user on the screen. So increment and decrement operators can be very handy, especially when it comes to counting and comes to looping. Numeric operators form an important part of how we do various computations in JavaScript. We'll take a look at more of these in practical uses in future videos. Have a good day.